Here's why you shouldn't implement Microsoft Copilot in your environment. If you still think you want to by the end, then I'm going to give you some actionable insights for how to prepare your environment first. But speaking of first, training is going to be the first one on my list. If you think this is something you could simply turn on like a light switch and walk away from, this is not the product for you. Users aren't going to know how to even use this thing. They certainly won't know how to use it correctly. They certainly won't know how to use it correctly to improve their productivity. Training is going to be required. Otherwise, this is going to be a failure. And that's regardless of which Copilot product you're talking about, whether it's Copilot for M365, which is the number one thing I'm asked about as a consultant, or GitHub Copilot, which is the number two thing that people ask about all the time. And that doesn't even get into all of the slew of other Copilots that seem to come out every week. The next one on the list is oversharing. We've all overshared before, but this is in your environment now. This is when you have data that is shared with more people than it needs to be. And more than likely, you have no idea as an administrator that this is even going on. If you're a site owner, I bet you don't know what's going on either. SharePoint is designed for sharing. I mean, it's right there in the name, SharePoint. So naturally, you're going to be sharing this with people. You're going to be sharing sites. You're going to be sharing files. You're going to be sharing data in general with other people. And the quick answer for a lot of people is, oh, they'll just share it with everyone in the organization. Oh, I'll just add everyone but external users to my site members group because I just want everyone in the company to access my site because this is for everyone. Well, fast forward a few years and now you're going to start to have some sensitive data. You're going to have things that don't need to be out there for everyone to be able to see. And that's where we start to get into this problem. We saw it with Delve, and organizations were very quick to just simply turn that feature off. Kill Delve, stop using it, don't allow anyone to use it. Hey, our problems are gone, right? Wrong. They're back, and it's going to be like Delve on acid. But think about how often you do site access reviews, either across the tenant or even on a site-by-site basis. How often is that happening? Well, as a consultant, I'm telling you, it's pretty much zero. You're not doing them. And if you're not, the Copilot is not going to be the best thing for you, at least not until you start to fix the problems, and I'll tell you how to start doing that. But first, we're going to cover the next topic, which is trust issues. So how many people are going to just take content from AI, a draft that Copilot's made for you, slap it in an email, shoot it off to a client, and not think again about it? Go grab another cup of coffee. Well, when that content offends a client, or if it's inaccurate, or it contains data that client should not have known about, or facts they should not have known about, that's going to be a big problem. You're going to have a cardboard box on your desk for you to put all your stuff in and get out of the building. I've heard these stories before, and this is way before AI was even in the picture. And if you're a developer looking at GitHub Copilot, this will count double for you, because while this can save you a tremendous amount of time, this can also ruin your day. The trust issue thing has got to be resolved, and it's got to be resolved ahead of time. I'll cover that in a minute, but the next reason why you shouldn't be using Copilot is going to be sensitive data. Now, we've all got sensitive data in our environment. That's just the nature of the cloud that we work in nowadays, the data that we're saving, which is almost always going to be in the cloud, and how that data is protected. Which, again, as a consultant, a lot of times the answer is it's not very well protected. You might have the site locked down, but you don't have other things in place to make sure that data is properly and fully secured. In the age of Copilot, everything is going to be searchable. I mean, technically, it already is searchable. You can go up to that Microsoft search bar at the top of your applications or at the top of SharePoint, and you can search for things. And it's going to give you contextually aware search results. It's going to be using files that you've worked with recently, people you've worked with recently. It's going to be giving you relevant search results based on all of your activity within the cloud. But it's using keyword searching for the most part. That's kind of how search bars have always worked in the past. Copilot is not a search bar. Copilot is going to know everything. That's the nature of how it's designed. That's the nature of how search is designed. The difference is Copilot does not use keyword matching. It uses semantic matching. If you say, "What is my boss's salary?" Well, a normal search may not know that. Copilot will, because it may find an email somewhere that you have access to and just never knew existed. And it says, "Oh, well, as of this date, your boss is making X number of thousands of dollars per year." Now, this isn't information that you would have probably ever found before using Microsoft Search or SharePoint Search or any other type of thing. But Copilot can find this stuff. And because it uses semantic matching, it can find data even though the keywords that you've specified in there don't match the content exactly. It knows the different types of words that all kind of mean the same thing, and it can find this information. This is a big problem, but it gets worse. Imagine if someone searches for an upcoming acquisition that they may not know about, that they wouldn't know about before it's officially announced. Well, suppose they just found out that their company is about to get bought by a much larger company. And they take that knowledge and they go out and buy a whole bunch of stock in that company. Well, that is called insider trading here in the US, and that's a big no-no. Well, all of that information shouldn't have ever been leaked. Even worse, maybe they sell this knowledge to people and other people start buying that stock. It could be a very, very messy situation. All because someone has access to information that they shouldn't. That's a good example of sensitive content and stuff that has to be properly secured so that the right people can see it and the wrong people cannot. There's a few different ways to tackle this problem, and I'll get into that, but let's jump into our next topic first, and that is having a way to measure success. If you don't have a way to measure your success with a Copilot implementation, then you might as well not even start doing this. You might as well just stay away from Copilot entirely because it's going to be a failure. The reason it's going to be a failure is because you haven't defined what success looks like. You don't know how to measure that success. So if you don't know where the finish line is, and you don't know how to make it to that finish line, how to know when you're at that finish line, then you're never going to know, did you actually do this correctly? Did you do this? Have you achieved what you set out to achieve? And tools are available to be able to measure this, to know how are you doing with this stuff. So if you've ignored everything that I've told you so far, and you still want to do this, I don't blame you, because it's really, really cool. I've been playing around with Copilot for a little while now, both Copilot for M365 as well as GitHub Copilot. But you're not here for developer content. You're here because you want to know, how do you fix these problems? How do you set yourself up for success with Copilot? And so let's start diving into what you can do to prepare for Copilot so that it's not a complete failure. Nobody wants that. So let's just jump back to the top of the list. We're going to go back through them all in order. Training was the first one. What do you do to address the training? Well, Copilot's going to be extremely expensive, at least Copilot for M365. $30 per user per month. That adds up pretty fast. If you don't have training in place, your ROI, your return on investment, is going to be really, really low. You want to have a program to develop a pilot group, to train and nurture that group. Make sure that there's feedback mechanisms in place. Make sure that there's a lot of support there, because they're going to have to learn a lot of stuff really quickly to be able to do well with this and provide you with the necessary feedback with what you need to do to tweak this Copilot implementation. You want to be able to identify a lot of different use cases for the different Copilot products. So just take Copilot for M365. You've got all the different Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You've got all those different applications. Each has their own Copilot. They all do different things. because they're all custom tailored for those applications. In Word, it's going to be more about content generation. In Excel, it's going to be a lot more about analysis and charting and things like that. You want to list out a lot of the use cases for those applications and provide it to those users so that they kind of start to get an idea of what Copilot should be used for, what it's best used for. But that's really only a starting point, because they're going to find new ways of using Copilot. That is one of the most exciting parts for me. Obviously I could get it to do X, but what about Y? What about Z? What about all these other things? It can do a ton of stuff, and we are still just scratching the surface of that, and will be for a number of years. This is going to be a ton of fun for your users who are in a pilot group, but you've got to make sure the right support structure is in place to nurture those people and to give them the answers they need, and have a good constant feedback loop to gather information for when you need to expand your pilot group or roll it out to the whole company, whatever that next step looks like for you. And if you're getting value from this video, don't forget to click that subscribe button, like the video, and share it with a colleague who needs to know about this information too. Now let's look at the oversharing situation. This is going to be a big issue. It's going to take a little bit more time than just developing training for your users, because you're going to have to be able to find those instances where content is overshared. Now, this is done through a number of ways. If you've got the budget, SharePoint Premium is going to have some additional reporting in the admin center. You'll be able to find information like, what content has been shared with everyone but external users. That's going to be a big part of identifying that content that is it's shared with everyone. And there's probably not a good use case for using that particular group. We're seeing more and more that you want to have a group that defines maybe all of your full-time employees, maybe your vendors, and you kind of want to keep these things separated so that it's easier for site owners to share content with the right groups. Other features in the Microsoft Admin Center are going to allow you to trigger site audit requests for your site admins so that they will have to review their site access and approve it, saying that the site access is currently accurate. No changes need to be made. Otherwise, they'll have to go make those changes and then kind of approve this request from the admin center, certifying basically that their site security is correct. This will put a lot of responsibility on the site owners, but there's going to have to be some training there for best practices for maintaining your site security and how to do these kind of access, reviews. Another feature with SharePoint Premium is going to be the restricted access controls. So this is going to be a way that tenant admins or SharePoint admins can lock down particular sites. Suppose content's being shared with external users and a whole bunch of other stuff on a site, and you just need to quickly lock this thing down. Well, once SharePoint Premium is active, then you're going to be able to go into that site and say you're going to restrict the access regardless of what content has been shared. We're going to say these are the following groups of people that can access this site. That's going to override anything that the site owners have done. It'll override anything that the site users have done. It clamps down the site access immediately. It's going to be very, very beneficial for those situations where you've got a lot of content on the site and it's just going to take forever to get all that access under control, and you just need to do it now. Now, SharePoint Premium is going to cost, a premium. But for those organizations that have the budget for it, it's going to give you a lot of advanced management capabilities for access. Otherwise, you've always got things like Purview, which, the compliance center in M365. There's a lot of options in there for securing content. We'll talk more about that when we get into sensitive information. But one thing you could do as well is, while you currently cannot specify that Copilot should not access a particular site or library. What you can do right now is you can go into the site settings or library settings and basically block all crawling of that. Make sure it's not in the search index. Now, it's a little bit overkill because now users can't search for content on that site. Maybe in an emergency situation, you could do something like that. We're going to have more options from Microsoft in the future for allowing searching, but not allowing Copilot to analyze the content of a document or analyze data, things like that. Copilot will know that the data is there, but it just won't be able to analyze it because it hasn't been given permission to do that. There's a lot of those types of controls in Purview, but that really corresponds to more like a classification, labels, and sensitive content like that. But we need to talk about the trust issues again. How are you going to handle the trust issue with Copilot? Because any generative AI is going to give you stuff to use, and you can't just trust that stuff blindly. You need to have policies in place to govern what your users can and cannot do with AI-generated content and what process they need to follow if they're going to use some of that stuff. In the case of documents, but especially code, you've got to specify that everything has to be reviewed by a human and make sure that it is accurate, which it should be because Copilot doesn't generally have too much of a problem with accuracy. But it's got to be reviewed for consistency, for clarity. In general, it needs to make sense. It needs to provide the information it was expected to provide. That's going to require manual review of all that content before it can be sent out to a client, before it can be added into application code, things like that. Copilot is going to save you a ton of time with creating documents, analyzing data, even writing code. That's the whole point of this. That's why we're all excited about this. But you're going to have to take this in a very, very controlled way. Otherwise, you're going to have very nasty bugs in your code, leading to security issues, leading to lost data. You're going to send out content that is not ready, that does not reflect the quality that the organization expects content to have. You'll run into a lot of problems because we're going to get lazy. We're going to trust this stuff too much, and we shouldn't be trusting it at all. It should be like an assistant. That's what I always tell people. Hey, treat Copilot like it's an assistant. You ask it to do something, and when it comes back with that work, you review it. You make sure it is good. You make sure it sounds like it came from you. And then you can incorporate this into your work. That's the safest way to do it, and having a policy in place to ensure that that's the expectation of all of the users in the company that use AI, you'll be setting yourself up for success. Now let's move on to the sensitive data topic. So sensitive data is going to be handled primarily through Purview. While you could lock your sites down and things like that for the file access, the list access, things like that. But what about the people who do have access? What can they do with that data? What can Copilot do with that data? Purview is going to help you a lot with this. Purview is going to let you create policies to restrict what Copilot can access. So if a user searches for content, Copilot's going to know that that piece of content is there, but it's going to tell the user that it's not able to summarize the document or whatever that may be. Copilot will know it doesn't have access to the contents of that document. So those are going to be important policies to set in place for particular content labels. So what other things can you do to protect your sensitive content from Copilot? Well, you need to make sure you know where it's at. Identify all those different containers that have your sensitive data. Identify labeling for all of those things. Require labeling even for those containers, whether it's a SharePoint site or a team, whatever that is that has that content. Make sure that you've got labeling in place and enforced as needed to make sure that the protection is being applied to that content. And this is an ongoing process. This is not really a one-time deal, although the first time you do it is going to be the longest because you'll have to get everything really all set up. At that point, you'll just have to keep maintaining this. And as new containers, as new sites are created that need that sensitive information, you're applying the correct labels to those sites or whatever the case may be. And then finally, you're going to have to train the users on how to classify information. Make them comfortable with what they're going to do to this information to label it and what the consequences or what's the result of those labels being applied, whether it's to encrypt documents, whether it's to prevent forwarding outside the organization, whatever really that is. Make sure that they're aware of how to apply this labeling to protect sensitive content and what the impact will be. Finally, you want to have a way to measure the success of your implementation. You're going to want to have some sort of a dashboard. And what Microsoft is providing for people is there's a Viva Insights dashboard for Copilot implementation. It's going to give you information on how you're using this. It'll give administrators a big view of what's going on with this implementation so you can measure what that success looks like. It's currently in a public preview, so you should be able to go ahead and get that up and running, but it's possible that it's already in general availability by the time you see this video. And if you want to find more information about SharePoint Premium, because we did touch on that a few times with some of the benefits, because it will definitely make Copilot easier to roll out, then you'll want to click on this video on the screen to see more information on what SharePoint Premium is all about.